We'll call to order the Minot City Council meeting for today, Monday, December 20th, 2021. It is 5:30 in the afternoon. Appreciate everyone being here for our meeting. I would ask that everyone go ahead and put your electronic devices either on silent or on vibrate, and we'll keep the distractions down to a minimum. Roll call, please.
Evans.
Here.
Janser.
Here.
Olson.
Here.
Pittner.
Here.
Pajagula.
Here.
Ross. Sitma.
Here. Number 2 is Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Number 3 on our agenda this afternoon is the mayoral appointments. We have Todd Wagnes, term 1 to expire January 31st, 2026, and Charles DeMakis, term 2 to expire December 31st, 2026 for the Planning Commission. So
Move approval.
Motion by Alderman Janser to approve, and a second by Alderman Ross. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Final call for discussion. Motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Pittner.
Yep.
Pajagula.
Yes.
Ross.
Yes.
Sitma.
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Number 3 on our agenda, or number 4 rather, is the city manager's report. There was a report attached. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, I do have a few items for the council this evening, but before I get into those, was there any questions with regards to the report in general? Any clarification points? Okay. First of all, I guess I have 3 items to present to the council tonight. I believe all 3 of them are good news. So the first one would be, recently we had a vacancy in their city clerk position. And the city clerk position is a civil service position, which means it's eligible for internal promotion. And staff has concluded that, and as a result, Michaela McWilliams will be our new city clerk. She's here in the audience this evening. We decided to not have her first day on the job be up here on the dais with the city council. So, and I want to give a public thank you to Liana for filling in and doing double duty here for a little bit. She's done a great job filling in, but I'm sure she's ready for Michaela to take on her duties as well. So we look forward to having Michaela in this new capacity coming out of the finance department, and confident that she'll do a great job. And thank you to Alderman Ross for serving on the panel that helped interview the candidates for that position. Second point that I'd like to talk about is I recently had an opportunity with some other community leaders to go take a tour of the new Trinity Hospital, and just want to say how impressive of a facility that will be and how much pride the community will be able to take in that facility. It does appear to be very well thought out, well planned, well designed, and again, I think it's something that'll be a significant positive for our community going forward, especially in health and medical care and expectations and quality of life. But looking forward to the progress in that facility being opened and serving our community here in the near future. Finally, the last thing is we've been talking for some time about a community satisfaction survey, and we have the results of that, and I do have the consultant online prepared to do a presentation for council this evening. So Derek, if you would like to turn that on, and we have Mr. Jason Morato from ETC Institute here, who is prepared to provide a PowerPoint presentation to the council and the community.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hello, how's everyone doing today?
Doing just fine. We can hear you perfect. Proceed when you are ready.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, my name is Jason Morato. I'm with ETC Institute, and ETC is a marketing research firm based in the Kansas City area. And the thing we specialize in is conducting community surveys for local governments. And this past fall, for the first time, we conducted a community survey for the city of Minot. So today I'm going to go through the high-level findings from the survey. The full report is very detailed and comprehensive. So today I'm going to focus on the key findings from the survey. This is a slide that I added to the presentation I originally sent late last week. This just gives a little background about ETC Institute. We're based in Olathe, Kansas, which is in the Kansas City area, but we're a national leader in providing market research for local governments. We've been doing this type of work for over 35 years. And in the last 10 years alone, we've conducted surveys in more than 900 communities all across the country. So this is really the type of work that we specialize in. This is just a quick rundown of what I'll go through today. I'll go over the purpose and methodology of the survey. What I call the bottom line up front are our main conclusions. Then I'll go through the major survey findings to show how we came to those conclusions, and I'd be happy to answer any questions as well. So there are several reasons to conduct a survey like this. One is to get an objective assessment of how satisfied residents are with major city services, and also to determine what Minot residents feel are the top priorities for the community. This survey also will hopefully set a baseline for future surveys. A lot of communities that we work with conduct these surveys every other year. That way you can start to measure the trends over time and make sure you know what the current priorities are for the community. And then also we're able to compare your results with other communities across the country. So this survey, the mailed version of it was 7 pages long. On average, takes residents about 15 to 20 minutes to complete the survey, which is a pretty typical length for one of our community surveys. These surveys was administered by a combination of mail and online to randomly select residents throughout the city. Our goal was to receive at least 400 completed surveys, and we accomplished that goal. We ended up with 403. And the results of the 403 surveys at the 95% level of confidence has a margin of error of plus or minus 5%. So essentially that means that if we conducted this survey the same way 100 times, 95 times the results would be plus or minus 5% for what we're reporting. So the results aren't perfect, but really it does have a small margin of error. Here we have a map of the city. The red dots are households that completed a survey, so we had a good distribution throughout the city. And then also we ensured that the demographics of survey respondents reflects the actual population of the city. So we made sure that we had a good representation by key demographic areas such as age, race, ethnicity, and gender. So here are our main conclusions from the survey. We found that most residents feel that Minot is an excellent or a good place to live and to raise children. The top overall priorities for city services are maintaining city streets, traffic flow, and then police services. And then residents feel the top issues facing the city over the next 5 years are taxes, crime, affordable housing, and then road repair and maintenance. So first we'll look at some general perceptions that residents have of the city. Here we asked residents to rate their perceptions of Minot in a number of different ways. The dark blue are rated as excellent, the light blue is good, the gray is average, and then the pink are rated of below average or poor. So the blue are positive, the pink are negative. And at the top of this chart, you can see that most residents gave very high ratings to Minot as a place to raise children and as a place to live. In fact, 88% of respondents rated Minot as an excellent or a good place to raise children, and that's compared to only 6% who gave a rating of below average or poor. Here we asked residents to rate major categories of city services. So for this question, we're asking residents to rate these areas at the big picture departmental level. And then later on in the survey, we asked about some more specific areas within some of these categories, which we'll get into that just a little bit later. So for this question, also the blue are the positive ratings, the pink are the negative. Most areas received high ratings. In particular, the highest rated areas were fire services, police, library, water and sewer, customer service. There were 2 areas where at least a third of residents were dissatisfied. So that includes maintenance of city streets and the traffic flow. Even for those areas, which were the lowest rated, you did have about an equal number of positive and negative ratings. And then here we asked residents how safe they feel in various situations. Most residents feel safe in their neighborhood during the day. Most feel safe in commercial areas during the day. Most also feel safe alone in the neighborhood just in general. 31% do say they feel unsafe in commercial areas after dark. And about an equal number say they feel safe in those situations. So we also compare your results to other communities. On this chart, the dark blue bar are the satisfaction ratings for Minot residents. So those were either very satisfied or satisfied or very satisfied. The light blue are the satisfaction ratings for the Plains region, which includes the state of North Dakota as well as some surrounding states. And then the gray bar are the satisfaction ratings from all across the U.S. So in most areas, your ratings are pretty similar to other communities. There were a couple areas where your ratings were significantly higher. That includes local police protection. You had a 76% satisfaction rating. Regional average is 72%. National average only 64%. And then customer service from city employees is another area that stood out. You have a 61% satisfaction rating. The regional average is only 58%. National average is only 51%. There were 3 areas where your ratings were significantly below the regional and national average: code enforcement and then traffic flow. So now we'll take a look at the top overall priorities. This is something that we call the important satisfaction rating. And this is a tool that we use to help communities determine which areas should be the highest priorities to focus on. So this analysis is based on 2 types of data. First, we ask residents how satisfied they are with services, which is the type of data we've been looking at so far. And then as a follow-up question, we ask which of these services are the most important for the city to focus on. So the idea behind this is that those areas that have that combination of low levels of satisfaction, but at the same time are the areas that residents feel are most important, should be the highest priorities. So this first table is for overall major categories of city services. The areas in red are those that should be the highest priority. So making improvements in those areas would impact the greatest number of residents. So that includes maintaining city streets and overall traffic flow. The areas in yellow are a high priority, although they're a tier below the items in red. Police services just barely missed going into the very high priority category. That was the area that residents actually feel is the most important, but the reason it's third in the important satisfaction rating is because the satisfaction rating is very high for police services. Other high priority areas are water and sewer utilities, solid waste services, and code enforcement. So we also created an important satisfaction rating for some specific areas. This one is for city maintenance and public works. The area that stood out here as the highest priority, the one area in red, are the condition of major city streets. And then there are several areas that fell into the high priority category. So snow removal on neighborhood streets was the second highest priority. That just missed joining the condition of major streets in the red. Other high priorities are traffic flow, snow removal on major city streets, the condition of neighborhood streets, and then the timing of traffic signals. For public safety, here there's one area that fell into the very high priority category, which is overall efforts to prevent crime. And then areas that were also a high priority are the overall quality of police protection, the visibility of police in neighborhoods, and then how quickly police respond to emergencies. And then for code enforcement, here there was also one area in the red that fell into the very high priority category, which is cleaning up trash and litter on residential property. Falling just behind that is the second highest priority, is cleaning up trash and litter on commercial property. Other high priorities are the maintenance of residential and commercial property, and then parking enforcement on neighborhood streets. So now we'll take a look at some other survey findings. We asked residents, do you feel the current level of code enforcement is too much? Is it not enough? Is it about right? 50% of respondents say it's about right. 46% say the current level of code enforcement is not enough. 4% actually say it's too much right now. We asked how supportive households would be of the city implementing a special assessment district to install sidewalks. Kind of mixed results. 45% are either very or somewhat supportive, compared to 37% who are not supportive. 18% are not sure, which generally means they need some more information. Then we asked about support for the city implementing special assessment districts to install street lighting. Here, there's a little more support. 62% are either very or somewhat supportive, compared to 26% who are not supportive. Then we've got 13% who are not sure. And then we asked about support for a tax increase to support increasing maintenance on city streets. Again, kind of mixed results here. 43% very or somewhat supportive, 50% not supportive. We asked where residents currently get information about the city. The top source is local TV stations, where 70% of respondents get information about the city through local TV news. The other top sources were the local newspaper, city's website, and then city's Facebook pages. As a follow-up question, we asked, which sources of information do you most prefer to receive information about the city? And these top four were in the same order that they were in how residents are currently getting information. So local TV news, local newspaper, city's website, and then the city's Facebook pages. So it seems that people are getting information through the source that they most prefer. And then we asked residents, what are the biggest issues facing the city within the next 5 years? You can see the top issue was high taxes, property taxes, finances, followed by crime. Other high priorities were affordable housing, and then road repair and maintenance. So just to recap, we saw that most residents rated Minot as an excellent or a good place to live and to raise children. The top overall priorities for city services were maintaining city streets, traffic flow, and police. That's for the major categories of city services. We also looked at some of those more specific areas within those categories that residents felt were the highest priorities. And then the top issues facing the city over the next 5 years: taxes, crime, affordable housing, and then road repair and maintenance. So that is everything that I had. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Thank you, Mr. Moreto. Does anybody have any direct questions regarding the presentation? I'll look around one more time. Any questions for Mr. Moreto? Alderman Patagula.
Does a comment qualify?
We can go to a comment, as it doesn't look like there's any questions. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to compliment you on the survey and the mayor, well, him too, but the city manager for facilitating this. I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist, so I have extensive experience in assessment and surveying. And from my professional perspective, this looks very well done. And from my perspective as an alderman, this is very fruitful, very intriguing, very provocative information. It provides a very nice balance, I think, to the squeaky wheel gets the grease or the attention kind of dilemma that we struggle with sometimes. It's very gratifying to hear that members of the community generally are satisfied with the city. And the areas that they rate as priorities, I think, really are ones that the council and the city manager and city department heads will need to be looking at very seriously and trying to implement them, those priorities the citizens have set in terms of our long-range planning. So this has already opened my eyes, has already gotten me personally do a lot of thinking, and I'm looking forward to working with the rest of us here to try to figure out all the implications of what you've found for us. Very, very pleased, very impressed. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Moreto? Mr. City Manager.
Yes. Again, thank you for the council's support in doing this. This is a process that I've seen be very fruitful for a lot of communities, especially council members and staff, in coordinating together to make important decisions with limited resources and budget, to put those decisions and those resources where the community really wants to see the most improvement. So just for the public's sake and for the council's sake, next steps is the full report and documents, including a dashboard, will be included on the city's website, if not by the end of this meeting, early tomorrow. So if anyone of the public wants to go through and review that data for themselves, they're welcome to do so. Also, for a significant period of time, there was a link to this survey. So even after we got the 403 respondents, we did have the link up available on the city website for anyone who wanted to take that. I want to say we had probably over 140 responses to that. ETC will also do some analysis of that, of what that means, incorporated in that, and we'll have those results available. But more importantly is staff will be using this to develop goals and performance measures we can measure success. So as Mr. Morato talked about earlier, this is the baseline, and we'll be able to compare our results in future surveys about whether or not we're having the impacts that we want to see in the areas that we're targeting specifically as we put the results of this data to work on behalf of the community and the citizens and the taxpayers. Also, we'll be using this significantly with the council in strategic planning and the budget process going forward. So hopefully this is a helpful tool for you as you begin to prioritize where we allocate those limited resources that we have to make the community better and stronger as the citizens have provided input going forward. So we look forward to using that as well. So again, this isn't just a study or some information that we just want to gather and then put on the burner. We do plan on putting this to work significantly and getting the best return on investment. I guess probably the key finding that I see coming out of all of this is the juxtaposition of high priority being sidewalks and streets and those types of things, but a strong, clear message that there's no interest in higher taxes to help pay for that. And so that'll be the challenge, I think, for the council and staff is how do we move the needle on that, understanding that our constituents, our citizens are a bit tapped out with regards to providing any more money to the city to be able to do that. So that's going to have to be gained through efficiencies, potentially cutting of other services that we provide right now that we're paying for to free up that money, or seeking for other funding, whether that be federal or state funding, if it's available to even help with some of those categories. But that's one of the biggest takeaways I had from this survey and the results is the challenge that's very clearly evident there, that there is some need and some desire from the community that we make improvements in those areas, but they're not willing to give us more money to do it. So,
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Alderman Ross.
Yeah, either Mr. City Manager or Jason, if you could answer this. If this is our baseline and we're going to be using this as a tool to set goals, how long before we revisit a survey like this to capture the results and see how effective we've been in using this tool to better the community?
Alderman Ross, Mayor, typically, as Mr. Morato said earlier in the presentation, it's usually every 2 to 3 years that we would do this survey. So I would recommend at a minimum this survey be budgeted to be reconducted every 2 years. Again, the survey data only has a shelf life of so long before it becomes invalid as things change. And then hopefully as we're making progress on making priorities and investments and decisions, that changes the data and the results of satisfaction. So the more often you can tune in on that. I don't think it's worth doing every year because I don't know we can make that much change to measure that in a survey. But at a minimum of every 2 to 3 years, it should be redone if you're going to keep the effectiveness of the tool.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments from the council? Alderman Patagula.
Just to follow up on that, to again start the process of educating citizens, a lot of the changes, particularly in terms of roads and maintenance and signals and things like that, are in our capital improvements plan, and that's a 5-year plan. And many of the things we're talking about, we're looking at, like improving Broadway, improving traffic flow throughout the city, those are necessarily long-term projects, many years. So I agree very much that there's no point in doing it earlier than every 2 years, but that it's important, I think, for everybody to be patient with the results, because in government, it's not like in private enterprise where you can snap your fingers and if you're the CEO, it happens. And even then, transforming your directive into results takes time. So I think that's something I think we all need to be thinking about and being aware of.
Any further comments or questions? Mr. Morato, any final comments this evening?
No final comments, just that I appreciate having the chance to get the presentation and work with Harold on the survey. And hopefully we'll be doing the survey again at some point in the next 2 to 3 years. So, thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. Great information, and all to the points that the city manager had pointed out will be very, very useful. Do have to highlight that the number one source, though, for the information is not here tonight on what the city is up to. So thank you for the newspaper for being here as well. Let's move on to our next agenda item here. And this is number 5, public hearings. 5.1 is proposed ordinance to increase traffic fines. 2019, the North Dakota Legislative Assembly passed Senate Bill 2304, allowing the municipalities to adjust some of the traffic fines by as much as 100% of the state's fine schedule. Chief Klug identified traffic behaviors that contribute to the public safety issues and is recommending a revised schedule to increase the fines as allowed by state law. The attached ordinances accomplishes these goals, and this is the second reading. The first reading again was on 12/6, December 6th, which was our previous city council meeting. This is a public hearing for anyone to come forward and speak either in favor, in opposition, or neutral to the proposal. One more call for a public hearing for anyone to come forward and speak either in favor, in opposition, or neutral to the proposal before us. Seeing none, what are the wishes of the council? Alderman Pittner.
Mayor, I move that we close the public hearing and approve the item with staff recommendations.
Motion to close the public hearing and approve the item with staff recommendations by Alderman Pittner. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Olson. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Final call for discussion. Motion is to approve on second reading. Please call the roll.
Pittner,
Yes.
Pachigula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans, Janser,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Our next public hearing is consider a vacation of a portion of 13th Avenue Southeast right-of-way on November 15th. City Council voted in favor of holding a public hearing on the request to vacate 13th Avenue Southeast. A public hearing was noticed in the Monmouth Daily News for 4 consecutive weeks as required by local and state law. A land development application, the Jefferson South Edition, is currently in process and relies on the approval of this right-of-way vacation. The recommendation to the City Council was to approve a resolution providing as attachment D that vacates that portion of 13th Avenue Southeast is provided in the right-of-way vacation Exhibit A, also the attachment A, subject to the recordation of an excess easement as illustrated in attachment B. This is a public hearing for anyone to come forward and speak either in favor, in opposition, or neutral to the recommendation before us. One more call for comments on the public hearing. Seeing none, what are the wishes of council? Alderman Janser.
Mr. Mayor, I move we close the public hearing and approve the item.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Janser to close the public hearing and approve the item, second by Alderman Pittner. Any discussion on the motion to approve? Second call for discussion. Final call. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Pachigula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Motion is approved. 5.3, another public hearing, the annexation of Outlot 33, less Lot A and less portion of the Bellevue Second Edition. Albert McFarlane, property owner, requests the annexation of Outlot 33, less Lot A and less portions of the Bellevue Second Edition to connect to city services. The recommendation to the City Council was to approve the first reading of this ordinance to annex the subject property. One more time, a public hearing for comments on the recommendations to the City Council for the above-mentioned item, either in favor, in opposition, or neutral. Final call on the public hearing for comment. Seeing none, what are the wishes of council?
Mr. Mayor,
Alderwoman Olson.
I move that we close the public hearing and approve the item.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson to close the public hearing and approve the item. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Pittner. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Pachigula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans, Janser,
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to our next section. This is the Planning Commission. 6.1 is a public hearing, Lot 7, Dakota Square, Second Edition, a public hearing to consider a request from Ryan Heilstead, representing Dayton Hudson Corp. T0085, the Target Corporation, owner for a zoning map amendment from C4 planned commercial to C2 general commercial with a PUD overlay, planned unit development for the purpose of building an expansion. The property is legally known as Lot 7 of Dakota Square, Second Edition, to the city of Minot, North Dakota. The recommendations to the city council is to pass an ordinance for zoning map amendment from C4 planned commercial to C2 general commercial with the PUD overlay, the planned unit development. Again, this is a public hearing for anyone to come forward and speak in either in favor, in opposition, or neutral to the recommendations before us. One more call for comments on the public hearing. Seeing none, what are the wishes of council? Alderman Pittner.
Mayor, I move that we close the public hearing and approve the item.
Motion by Alderman Pittner to close the public hearing and approve the item. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Olson. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Pajagula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Our final public hearing for the evening is the River Oaks 6th Edition. This is a public hearing to consider a request from Larry Gullickson, represented Gary Oakland, the owner of the subdivision plat, to rearrange the platted lots as part of the River Oaks 4th Edition to create River Oaks 6th Edition. As part of the request, the applicant is seeking a zoning map amendment for the portion of the property from R2, two-family residential district, to R1, single-family residential district. The legal description of the proposed plat is all of River Oaks 4th Edition, less River Oaks 5th Edition, Township 155 North, Range 82 West, City of Minot, North Dakota, in Ward County. Recommendations to City Council was to approve the subdivision to be known as the River Oaks 6th Edition and to pass an ordinance for the zoning map amendment from R2, two-family residential, to R1, single-family residential. Again, this is a public hearing for anyone to come forward and speak either in favor, in opposition, or neutral to the recommendations before us. One more call for comments on the public hearing for the recommendations before us. Seeing none, what are the wishes of council?
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Janser.
I move we close the public hearing and approve the item.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Janser to close the public hearing and approve the item as recommended, second by Alderman Pittner. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Pajagula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Motion is approved. We do have three more items from the Planning Commission, 6.3 to 6.5. We can either take these with consent or we can take them individually. Alderman Pittner.
Move approval on all remaining items.
Motion by Alderman Pittner to remove the remaining items as recommended from the Planning Commission by Alderman Pittner, second by Alderman Ross. For the audience, these items will be passed on with the recommendations from Planning Commission unless we have somebody in the audience who also wants us to take one of these individually. Seeing none, any discussion on the motion to approve? Any discussion? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to pass 6.3 to 6.5 as recommended by the Planning Commission. Please call the roll.
Pittner,
Yes.
Pajagula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Our next area of our agenda tonight is Section 7, the consent items. We have 7.1 through 7.16. I've been asked to pull 7.6 from tonight's agenda for consideration at a later date. Some language that needs to be cleaned up on that. So we have 7.1 through 7.5 and 7.7 through 7.13. Do any of these items need to be pulled for individual discussion? Seeing none that need to be pulled, what are the wishes?
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Ross.
I move approval on the consent items.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Ross to approve, the rest on consent with the recommendation, second by Alderman Pittner. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Pajagula.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Our next section of our agenda tonight are the action items. 8.1 is the approval of the 2022 service agreement with the MAC EDC. We do have Harold Stewart and both John McMartin here for questions if needed on this. We do have the staff that has developed the formal service agreement for the entities that receive funding from the city in exchange for the services, including MAC EDC. The recommendations to the City Council was to approve the service agreement for the Minot Area Chamber EDC and to authorize the mayor and finance director to sign the agreement. What are the wishes of council?
Move approval.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Janser. Any discussion on the motion to approve? Alderwoman Evans.
I have a questions for Mr. McMartin.
Good evening, John. Do you want to just make sure the button is on there for us?
Good evening.
Thank you.
Is that better? Yep.
Perfect.
Hi. So I am looking at 2021s that we approved this year. So it was my understanding that perhaps a report on the objectives of 2021 was going to come in December. I talked to you earlier today. It seems like that'll be January 2021. But can you walk us through just generally the 2021 objectives? And what I'm looking for is just to feel confident that they've been met or will be met very soon before we move forward in, going ahead with 2022s.
Certainly, Alderman Evans and Mayor. She is absolutely correct. The contract called for it. I visited with the city manager and the city finance director about moving it. We found that when we were doing this in June and December, we start preparing those in November, and so we miss almost an entire month of the 6-month period we're supposed to be reporting on. So looking at that, I have planned to bring a report to you in January, probably the second meeting in January, just to make sure that we've got all the data there. You'll hear in my report in January comments on the logistics park. We have secured the funding for the rail extension. The check is in the mail, hopefully. And we're at 90% design work on the track for the track extension that we've talked about, that you've heard us talk about in the press. We've spent money on a switch from BNSF for all of the talk about inflation. I'm glad we ordered early because there was one switch put in off of the Tapman Spur, which cost 50% more than the switch we put in that we're going to be required to put in, and they're essentially the same switch. So I don't know what happened to inflation on that, but I'm glad we ordered it and paid for it in advance. There's work being done on the Chrissy grant. We've had several monthly meetings already. We're progressing. That's a 2-year process on that particular work that's being done. I'm pleased with the work that's been done to date. I've begun to involve Mark Lyman in that, given a recent article you may have seen about me and my future. And that probably won't happen until sometime in August, just so that you know I'm around for a while. And then we're also providing some temporary, we call it temporary because we don't have long-term leases with them, for both La Hoist, which is your lime provider for the city, and with Farsted. And both of those groups we're doing transloading on the intermodal site when we were able to come to an agreement with RMG to provide intermodal service out there. one of the requirements that BNSF gave us was that there would be no transloading on the site. And as it's come to pass, all 3 tracks get fully used when there are intermodal trains out there. We've continued to support the Minot Air Force Base. We've done the virtual symposium completely in 2019 or 2020, excuse me, and then in 2020 we've done a virtual and a live symposium back in DC. We've responded to RFPs from the state. There has been a response sent to Colliers, which is a site selector company, and that's a follow-up after one of Mark's meetings, Mark Lyman's meetings that he attended in Chicago. 2 companies have asked for secondary information, and Mark has found some companies just to try to make cold calls with. So we've been active in that arena. We've had 2 prospective clients over the last 6 months, and I think I mentioned this before in front of council. Erica Ryan, who was a site selector, reached out to us for first information on our industrial park and areas close to the airport. She eventually settled on, and we put her in touch with the landowner, where you have approved a plat for the new FedEx ground service. We've got a list of trade shows and conferences that we've attended. We are very close to completing 30 BR&E surveys, which will comply with the contract. We've got a new project. We've started Startup Minot, which will be starting in the first quarter. That's an entrepreneurial, it's a Startup Minot Academy and startup networking events. The first event is on January 13th. We've all talked about and celebrated the success with CTE. Our role in that was to bring the application to the Magic Fund, provide the supporting information, and then there is also work done by our attorney in preparing all of the documents in conjunction with the city attorney, Kelly. Maybe not in conjunction, but preparing them, and then the city staff responds and we make the corrections. We've not completed a FAM tour. In talking with when Mark was down in Chicago, there were any number of site selectors there, and in talking with them, they really had not restarted, and we're revisiting how and if they do FAM tours now. We're going to do our best to get one of those done this next year, and then Lois is up and running, and we keep adding properties, and we've started adding commercial properties as the city manager and I have had questions. So kind of in a nutshell, you've got at least a preemptive look at what you're going to hear from me a little bit more formally, and you'll have a full report next month. As I said, probably the second meeting in January.
I appreciate that. One more question. I see one of the objectives that's carried over, and that I think is even more important with the announcement of your impending retirement, is the strategic plan and getting that, because that's so essential to any organization to have that in place, regardless of staff transitions and stuff. So tell me more about where the board is with that, and can we expect that to be done before you ride off on your...
I would hope that we will have a fair amount of the work done. I'm not sure it will be completed and adopted. Alderman Evans, the strategic plan was carried over simply because in the 2021 contract, it was listed as for a completion date, in 2022. So we're just continuing that effort, and would hope that we'll have some further action on it, at least in terms of securing a consultant and beginning to do some work towards that in the first quarter.
Great. It's great to hear. Thanks, John.
Yep.
Thank you, John. Any other questions for Mr. McMartin at this time? Alderman Pittner.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Mayor. Sorry. Thank you, John, for showing up and answering the questions. In the future, do you feel it'll always be a delay between the agreement being approved in December and then the report coming in January?
I believe on our part, I think that's the most pertinent, Alderman Pittner. I'm sorry, I should have started with Alderman Pittner, but I believe that that's the most prudent because I think we lose some valuable information that's coming in and being conclusion at the end of the year. The reason for the contract being here is the city's contribution. We need the contract to have the city's contribution continue to support us.
Okay.
That's the reason we're here.
Continue.
And I have no problem with that, and I completely understand the timing issues. I would like to, as a council member, and for council members in the future, to be able to maybe get a report a little closer to the approval, maybe a week before. I understand you'll lose information, but to give an update closer to the approval, because I feel like our hands are a little bit tied with not having maybe a report prior to approving the agreement. Again, you've done a good job tonight of giving us the highlights of what you guys have been up to, and I have no problem approving it tonight. But again, if we could get maybe a report the meeting before with what you have
Right.
in December, and if in the second meeting in December we approve the agreement, I would feel that would be helpful for myself, and I feel other council members in the future.
I think Alderman Pittner, Mayor Sitma, I think we could, I believe we should be able to do that, and we would do that in regards to having a preliminary report like I just did, and then the final written report the following month.
Continue.
And just to clarify, it doesn't even have to be something in person. Even if there's something emailed out to council for us to review on an agenda, I think would completely suffice. But just so that we have something tangible to review prior to the agreement, I think would be helpful for myself.
So just to clarify, you said something in terms of an email, even highlighting the points.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Another follow-up, Alderwoman Evans.
So even like, John, what you just presented to us, like putting that in an email, just like these are the sort of the highlights kind of thing. I just want to, when we were here last year, we really, I think, pushed hard on, increasing, and we have been with all of the recipients of, I think, taxpayer money on accountability and metrics and stuff. And I really commend you and your board for moving the needle and getting closer to having some really great objectives and meeting those objectives. And I look forward to continuing to see that even mature more. But I really appreciate how far in a short period of time that you all have come, and considering COVID and the merger and everything that's been going on, it's been great to see. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Alderman Evans. I would comment that I think in one of the conversations you and I had a year ago, you indicated to me, well, you must be doing more things than what you've just talked about. And I have to tell you, it was one of those aha moments, or the light going on over my head going, yeah, we do a lot and we just don't talk about it because that's not what we're used to doing. So I appreciate your prodding because, yes, and what you've been asking for, I think the council needs to ask for.
Any further questions? Appreciate it, John. Thank you. Further discussion on the motion to approve. Second call for discussion. And final call. Motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Pajagula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to 8.2, the approval of the job description for the landfill attendant light equipment operator. The job description and reclassification is part of the budget process affecting the landfill. To account for the conversion of the non-career full-time scale employee in the landfill department to a civil service employee, the job description of the current landfill attendant is being reclassified to take on some duties associated with the compost collection. The job description is now available at the time of the budget reading. Was not available at the time of the budget reading and is now being provided before us. So the recommendation to the full council is to approve the job description for the landfill attendant light equipment operator.
Move approval.
Motion by Alderman Pittner to approve, second by Alderman Ross. Any discussion on the motion to approve? Any discussion on the motion? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Pittner,
Yes.
Pagagula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Our next item is the MI6 and Street Bridge options. The MI6 consists of flood control design from Broadway to Roosevelt Park on the south side of the bridge. Various alignment options were looked at through this area, and options consisted of reconstruction of the Ann Street Bridge ramps on the south side of the tracks to removal of the Ann Street Bridge in its entirety. The SRJB took action after reviewing the various options at the December 9th, 2021 meeting as the least expensive option in regarding to the flood control, which consists of recommending removal of the Ann Street Bridge and providing historical documentation as a mitigation effort in lieu of repairing the bridge. Recommendations, we have three. Recommendations to the council is to approve one of the options below in order to proceed with the design of the MI6 and forward the recommendations to the SRJB. Those recommendations are 3B1, remove the Ann Street Bridge in its entirety and allow the SRJB to complete the historical mitigation for the removal, or 3B 2-3, request the SRJB reconstruct the south portion of the bridge with the ADA access, and the city will commit required funding, approximately $1.6 million plus or minus, to complete the required repairs to open the remaining bridge north side of the tracks to the pedestrian use. That $1.6 million is for that south side, not the bridge in its entirety. Before we take any recommendation or any motions here, Mr. Dan Jonassen has some further details.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. With me tonight is Jerry Bent with Houston Engineering. Their firm is in charge of the design of MI6, which is part of the Ann Street Bridge that we're talking about now. Jerry has a brief presentation similar to what he gave to the Service River Joint Board, and some background information on what we've looked at for the Ann Street Bridge. So I'll let him give that, and after we're done, if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them for you.
Thank you, Dan. Good evening, Mr. Benson. Welcome back.
Good evening. Thank you. Let's see if I can get this to advance here.
There we go.
Might have been a little delayed. Sorry about that. Thank you for the opportunity to present tonight on behalf of the Service River Joint Board. So we'll start off the presentation with just a copy of the letter that was provided to the council from the Joint Board. I really highlighted the portion of it that was provided by the Joint Board that's really the action being requested by the Service River Joint Board, which is a decision on the long-term expectations for the Ann Street Bridge from the city side. Ultimately, within the flood control project, we would bring into account in the project either way. If the desire is to keep it long-term, we would reconstruct the south end. If there isn't a commitment to keep it long-term, then the cheaper option is what I will show you. So I'll walk you through a little bit of how we got there. The first image that's shown here is actually the preliminary concept for the area downtown from the preliminary engineers report completed by the Service River Joint Board back in 2012. Near the middle of the screen, I'm not sure if I can point or not. No, didn't look like it. Near the middle of the screen is the downtown area. As part of the preliminary engineers report, that area, there was an intention to have south side flood walls through the entire downtown reach. Those flood walls would have continued under Broadway and ultimately tied into a levee system that was proposed along the south side of the Maple Diversion. That was real early level planning done shortly after the 2011 flood. Following that preliminary design and based on additional review of what happened in the 2011 flood, including the image here, you can see that the area near Broadway and to the west as we get over towards the library, really some kind of limited impact to structures in that area. And so what's been done since that time is some updates to the protection, and I'll show you that on the slide here. So through that downtown area, the current concept that was put together through the preliminary engineering prior to May of this year really shortened the protection through downtown. So instead of having complete south side protection all the way to the Maple Diversion, Instead, we would have south side protection along the south side of the track shown in the green there as levees, with the red being flood walls over to about the location of the historic depot downtown, at which point the protection would come up the hillside to the south and really tie into high ground at that location. Within that area, obviously, impacts to the Ann Street Bridge happen within that area. This was the preliminary concept from back in May. Following that preliminary concept, a fair amount of field work was done, things like survey of the sites, some cultural reviews, environmental assessments, right-of-way needs were determined in the downtown area, and ultimately a couple of variations to that original plan came out of that additional review. And I'll show you those three. The three that were on the table prior to the joint board's last decision, we call options 3B1, 3B2, and 3B3. Not a tremendous amount of difference between the two. I'll walk you through one, and then I think you'll be able to just see the slight variations as we go to the last two. So within this area that we call phase MI6, as I said, on the left side of the screen, protection would start near the location of the historic depot. At that point, it would be a levee system parallel to the existing railroad tracks on the south side. That levee system would come up to the point of the existing 3rd Street Viaduct, at which point protection would go under the 3rd Street Bridge there through means of a concrete flood wall, very similar to what's on the north side of the river in that area currently. From there, a levee system would start from the east side of the 3rd Street Bridge, be a levee down to the location just to the west of 7th Street Northeast, at which point we would switch back to a flood wall just due to limited setbacks between the property and the river at that location. The flood wall would then continue off to the east and just shy of the pool in the Roosevelt Park area. Why do we stop there? Really, the only reason we stop there is because phase MI7 picks up from there and will actually carry protection down to Burdick and through the zoo area. So MI6 is this reach downtown. Under the option that we called 3B1, with it just being a levee system through that area, under the 3B1 option, we didn't include any reconstruction of the south side portion of the Ann Street Bridge, and instead, under the 3B1 option, the assumption was the bridge would be removed as part of this project because we do impact the south half, so the bridge would be fully removed under this option of 3B1. The next variation of that, and maybe I'll just flip back and forth a couple of times, you don't see a whole lot of change except for right in the area of the Ann Street Bridge. So the second, and that really is the only real adjustment that happens here between 3B1 and 3B2. Under 3B2, instead of fully removing the bridge, what we would propose to do is from the location where there's currently a metal truss that crosses over the main lines of BNSF Railroad, we would leave that metal truss in place. The metal truss is structurally sound per the review that the prior consultant did in the area. But from the south end of that metal truss, we would essentially build a new bridge starting at that point. The new bridge would cross over the flood protection levee. It would cross over the relocated roadway in that area. And then when we get to the south side of that relocated roadway, we would build a new ramp and stair system at that location to provide access down for the community to the south. So the option 3B3 option isn't a whole lot different. Same general concept. So the concept would be reconstruction of the bridge starting at the south end of the metal truss, come over the flood protection levee, but then at that point do a combination of a new ramp system and stairway system to bring the public down to the elevation of the downtown area. The realigned roadway at that location then would stay to the south side, so there would just be at-grade crossings there for pedestrians to cross over the street, hit the ramp system, come up and onto the bridge at that location. So those were the three options that were considered. As part of those options, and due to the involvement that the Corps of Engineers has with permit authority under Section 408, we held two different consultation calls with the Corps of Engineers and SHPO, really having to do specifically with the Ann Street Bridge to get an understanding of if one option was chosen over another option, what type of mitigation requirements would be there. And also maybe ultimately, you know, were the options permittable or feasible through their two organizations. So the results of that were that from the position of the State Historical Preservation Office, the Ann Street Bridge is a contributing property to the historic district. However, its connection to the historic district isn't really architectural in nature. It's really connectivity in nature. So as they explained it, and I'm not an archaeologist or a historian, but as they explained it, really the significance of that location is that it's provided access from the north side of the community to the south side of the community for a long time. And since it's been modified a number of times over the years, it doesn't have the architectural relevance that it takes to be on the register strictly for that purpose. So a few of the pictures on the bottom were just intended to illustrate a little bit about how the structure's changed over time, and certainly some interesting pictures where you can see it was fully enclosed at one point in history through that area. Out of those discussions, really what we took away were really three things. Number one was that if we chose the option, or if the joint board in cooperation with the city chose the option of going with 3B1, removal of the bridge, that would be allowed. However, if that was the chosen option, a documentation of its historic purpose and past usage would have to be put together. And there was discussion about maybe that would involve oral interviews, other things like that. But ultimately, there would be a document that could be passed on to future generations. If option 3B2 or 3B3 was chosen, since it would continue to provide access to the downtown area, and only be temporarily disrupted, no mitigation from historic nature would be required. And then the third thing we took away was the Corps of Engineers did lay out their recommendation to us, and their recommendation was really in order to avoid or to minimize any impacts to the historic structure, their recommendation or preference would be that the joint board pursue options that wouldn't remove the bridge. They said they wouldn't stand in the way of it happening, but they did want to make their recommendation known. Other pieces of the puzzle that we thought should be considered before the joint board made their decision was, existing rights for the bridge to be there. So currently, and for many years, there's been an agreement in place between the City of Minot and BNSF Railway to have the bridge at that location. That agreement has a number of different provisions in there. We've highlighted two that we thought were relevant. The first one that was highlighted there essentially says that the bridge can be there, but if it's ever raised, relocated, modified in the future, the agreement for it to be there becomes null and void at that time. So I would assume the railroad was trying to really preserve their future operations at the site. The second provision that we felt was relevant was provision 11 there, that just essentially says that if at any time it ceases to be used for its current purpose, that the easement becomes null and void under that option too. So I think our takeaway from that is if we were to go in and do either of the modifications under 3B2 or 3B3, we would likely have to enter into a new license agreement with BNSF Railway. Again, not an impossible thing to do, but we would have to go through a new negotiation on that. Other pieces that we looked at, or another piece we looked at, was just current condition of the bridge. Obviously, the bridge is been closed for some time here. So we pulled in just a few excerpts from the original structural evaluation that was completed by EAPC. At that time, a couple different options were laid out for reconstruction needs on the bridge, ranging from 1.2 to 1.6 million. What we wanted to point out to the joint board and ultimately to the council here tonight is that under options 3B2 or 3B3, the reconstruction that the flood control project would do would start on the south end of the metal truss, reconstruct everything to the south. So any structural deficiencies north of the metal truss would remain there, and obviously if only the south side was reconstructed, the bridge would likely need to remain closed because of those structural deficiencies. But somebody else would be responsible other than the joint board for correction of the deficiencies to the north. We then tried to look at really the portions of the project directly associated with the bridge and how costs would compare between the options. So we tried to really just focus on those that were comparable. So under the 3B1 option, where we would remove the bridge, the costs associated with removing the bridge is obviously the demolition cost of the bridge itself, along with that historic documentation. We're estimating that to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $210,000 to do those two items. Comparatively, if we were to switch to either of the two options, that would result in reconstruction of the bridge basically south of the metal truss, depending on which of the two options were chosen there, somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.4 to $1.6 million for those two. Other things that we just highlight there in green, like I said, least expensive option 3B1, really less BNSF permitting because we would be simply removing the bridge. Under the 3B1 option, we can really keep our reconstructed roadway close to the flood protection, so it does limit some of the private property impacts to the south. It also requires less relocation of utilities and roadways there, so some savings and costs there. But certainly the downside is the historic piece and impacts to the community, so that being read. So out of that, as the mayor alluded to, the joint board at their December meeting did select option 3B1 as their preferred option. Their lens is different than yours. Their lens is strictly looking at dollars and cents associated with the flood control project. So that was the basis for their recommendation there. And then they provided the letter to council. So with that, I guess decision and path forward, again, just kind of highlighting where we were at in the first two options, hoping to get some consideration from the council here tonight on preference, because we really need to choose which of those directions we're going to go so we can continue with the design of MI6. So
Thank you.
Mayor, I'll stop and answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bentz. Any questions at this time for Mr. Bentz on his presentation? Alderwoman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. It was very informative. We've had a lot of information over the years, and I think that this has been kind of most encapsulating, so I appreciate that. We have been approached by a group of individuals from downtown Minot asking for an opportunity to present some options to us. If we delayed a decision this evening for 2 weeks, what would it do in your plans?
Alderwoman Olson, Mayor Sipna, at two weeks, I think would really not be a problem from our end. As you can see there, we're really targeting being at 100% design early in 2013. So a couple of weeks afloat, I don't think it's a problem at all.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Bentz, 2023, I'm assuming.
2023, did I not say that?
2013.
2013 would be better, I'm assuming.
I just wanted to make sure. Otherwise, the entire testimony that I gave to the legislature is way off.
Sorry about that.
No, I just wanted to reconfirm what I thought. So I appreciate that. Any other questions for Mr. Bentz? Alderman Patagula.
I don't have any questions now, but this morning we spent half an hour on the phone. I had 12 specific items, and you answered my questions very thoroughly. It was a very spirited exchange and very, very informative, and a very nice summary, like Lisa said, of what the big issues are facing us. So I really appreciate that.
Welcome.
Any other questions? Alderman Pittner.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Mans, was it the Corps that said they were against removing the bridge? I missed that.
Yeah, so Alderman Pittner, Mayor Sipma, I'll just go back to that. So the Corps of Engineers, I'll flip back to the slide here. The Corps of Engineers, as part of their decision on the project, they're ultimately the ones that make the decision on allowing it or not allowing it. Within the way that they operate, they certainly try to choose the least impactful option. So the least impactful option would be to reconstruct the south end, have the bridge there for the long term. So for that reason, that is their recommendation, but not requirement, and they were clear on that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Alderman Janser.
Mr. Benz, so with the bridge not being used, and looking at the terms of the agreement with the railroad, in your opinion, what are the odds of them feeling like this has kind of gone to the point where it's in disuse, it's not being used? Are we in a situation where no matter what, we end up renegotiating the grant of the easement there?
Alderman Chancellor and Mayor Sibma, I don't know that I'm in the position to really answer that. Definitely the agreement, if you read it word for word, it says that should it cease to be used, that the agreement really goes null and void. I guess I don't have a good answer on how long can it cease to be used, but the agreement would be available to the council if you'd like to see a full copy of it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bentz, one question, and if you're not the right person to ask, by all means, just let us know. Going through and renegotiating with BNSF or either of the railroads has been somewhat of a lengthy process. Is there any indication from the railroad, because I'm sure they're well aware of the discussion, would that be impactful to the time frame if their negotiations ran into the typical timelines that they run?
Mayor Sibna, I definitely would just say that negotiations with BNSF or either of the railroads for that matter certainly take time. We've not had any direct discussions with them regarding the what happens with the Ann Street Bridge. We've been having discussions regarding right-of-way needs for the flood control project, but we haven't had specific discussions regarding the bridge itself.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Bentz at this time? Alderwoman Olson.
Yeah, thank you. There's been talk in the community when we have had the Ann Street Bridge on our agenda, and one thought that has been put out there is that maybe a portion of the bridge could be saved and relocated more as, just for historical purposes, whether it's in a park or something that people could just enjoy it for its historical significance. In the price that you are kind of giving us here to deconstruct it, would that be an option, or would it be just in ruins and not be able to be moved?
Sure. Alderwoman Olson, Mayor Sibma, I would say it certainly could be. I guess the only thing that I would maybe point to was during the discussions with SHPO, that was one of the items that came up was how about if we were to demolish the bridge, but we preserve, for example, the metal truss there to use it somewhere else in the community, could we use that to offset some of the mitigation needs associated with removal of the bridge? And the answer was no. And the reason the answer was no was it really goes back to what's the historic value of the bridge. And in the eyes of at least the State Historical Preservation Office, the historic value is maintaining the pathway from downtown to North Minot. It isn't really architectural in nature. However, certainly the metal truss, per the review that EAPC did, was found to be structurally sound. So lifting the metal truss off of there to relocate it somewhere else to the community, I feel that that's a viable option.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions at this time? Thank you, Mr. Bentz. And just for council and for the public's understanding as well, I did personally reach out to BNSF for that specific request to see if Burlington Northern would have any buy-in if in fact that the bridge were to be removed, and would BNSF want to cost share in helping remove a portion to save it? Their answer was no. Their answer was also no, and specifically asking because a person does have to ask on whether BNSF would like to cost share in rehabilitating that walkway from Northeast Minot into downtown Minot. Their answer again was no. So the question has been asked, and it was asked to the right people, and they did decline. Mr. City Manager.
And kind of following up on that, in addition, if council will recall, in the special session this year, when they reconvened on looking at distributing state funds and ARPA funding from the federal government, this was one of the projects that we requested to be considered for funding as well, and was not funded by the state.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. I believe we'd asked for $2 million, if I remember correctly, to the state legislate. That was the House. Help me out here, Mr. City Manager. We testified in front of the House Appropriations Committee for that, which then went to the full consideration, and that was not funded. We do not have a motion. I would look to the council for direction on this item, 8.3.
Mr. Mayor,
Alderwoman Olson.
prior to a motion, is there anyone from downtown Minot that would like to discuss this evening? Is there anything they would like to present to us?
We can certainly take a motion, and then we can take comment unless that motion is uncommentable.
It might be.
All right, we'll open it up for comment here, as it has garnered information or certain conversation in the past. So if anybody does want to come forward, I would just ask that you state your name, your city of residence, and try to keep comments 5 minutes or less.
Mayor Sitma, thank you for the time. Alderman Olson, also the prompt to step up here, I appreciate that. Josh Walski on behalf of the Downtown Business Professional Association. We reached out to each of you over the course of the day, simply requesting 2 weeks to be able to digest what we learned here tonight and offer some perspectives to each of you on the larger vision and the impacts to downtown that this is going to have. So if there were a motion to postpone, we would be very supportive of that and would like to see this community conversation take place for just a little longer before ultimately the decision takes place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walski. Anyone else to come forward and speak on the item? Alderwoman Olson.
Thank you. With that, Mr. Mayor, I would move that we table this until our next regularly scheduled meeting.
We have a motion to table until our next regular scheduled meeting, which is January 3rd,
It's not
2020.
table. Table, you
2022.
need- It's postponed. You don't want to table it. Table would be, we need a motion by the majority of us to bring it back. Postpone doesn't need that.
Tabling until a date certain does bring it back.
But with a motion to postpone, you can check your book, but motion to postpone, you don't need a motion then to bring it back up off the table.
Does the motion maker wish to
Whatever the correct verbiage is, just so that we can deal with it at our next meeting
Okay.
in January, yes.
motion to postpone then until our next regular scheduled meeting on January 3rd of 2022? Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Pittner. And motion to postpone, I believe you do have some comments on versus tabling. So is there any comments?
You can only, no, you can't. You can only comment on, you can't comment on the main question.
No, we're looking for comments on the motion to postpone.
Right.
That's.
Okay,
Yep.
I just want to make sure. Okay.
Any discussion on the motion to postpone, Alderman Pittner?
I think I can say what I'm about to say. I'm supportive of the motion to postpone. This is a big decision for our community. This is going to remove a landmark that will never come back, whether through agreement through the railroad or anything. So again, any information anyone's willing to provide, whether it be downtown or any other community members, I'm all ears until our next scheduled meeting to digest any information people want to provide. So.
Further discussion on the motion to postpone, Alderman Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I spoke with Mr. Wolski and Mr. Straight this morning on the phone and told them that I would be in support of tabling or postponing this for 2 weeks. And I'm still going to support, and I know you guys have intentions of putting together something for us to view. And I can tell you that I'd put it on your shoulders. It's big. It's a big job. Because right now, I'll support to postpone it for 2 weeks. But I really need to see something significant for me to support keeping this and funding it at a level that we're going to need to fund it at. Thank you. I went too far, but thank you.
Further discussion on the motion to postpone. Final call for the motion to postpone. Motion is once again to postpone this discussion until our next regular scheduled meeting, January 3rd, 2022. Let's not go too far, 2022. Please call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Pajigula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Next item is 8.4. This is the City Hall Rehabilitation Award of Bid, item work order 4468. Over the past months, the City Hall Rehabilitation Project was out for public bid. The bid documents reflected the final design approved by the City Council on the November 1st council meeting. On December 7th, the bids were opened, and the following is recommended to the full City Council. Recommendations are as follows. Two of them, the council award the bid to Rolec Contracting, Inc. in the amount of $9,520,250, which includes the base bid plus alternates 1 through 4. And 2, pass on first reading the attached budget amendment.
Move approval.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson to approve. Is there a second? Second by Alderman Pittner. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion on the motion to approve? Alderman Patagula, I think I saw your hand up
Yes,
first.
I had some questions for the city engineer. We had a productive discussion this morning, and there were several issues that he had to research further, so I wanted to ask Lance up and to talk about that.
Good evening, Lance.
Good evening. Mr. Mayor, before Alderman Pajigula begins, I did miss one thing in my recommendation, and that is to authorize you to sign the contract. So if this does go tonight, if the council wouldn't mind adding that to recommendation number 1 for me.
We'll get the questions, then we'll come back to the motion maker. Thank you. Alderman Patagula.
Yes, I appreciated the breakdown. I feel not so good that we weren't able to get more of the alternatives, but my particular concern had to do with the item number 6, the HVAC air purification system. From 7 through 12, based on our discussion this morning, it sounds like we can defer those and or possibly look for other sources of funding for some of the smaller items. I understand from our first discussion this morning that we probably should take these alternatives in sequential order, and we really pretty much have to go down the list. The problem I'm facing is that I'm very, very, very concerned about number 6, which is only $27,000. But before we can get to number 6, we have to deal with this flexible opening nano wall to the tune of $118,000. So if you could clarify a little bit more, you said you would be consulting with one of your colleagues in the air filtration business. Clarify a little bit more about number 6, the air purification system, and also if we could, because of the COVID emergencies and the likelihood of further problems with airborne particles and viruses and bacteria, if we could jump number 6 ahead a little bit.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor and Alderman Pajigula, what alternative 6 is an air purification system that essentially cuts a hole into the ductwork near the heat exchangers and inserts an LED light that produces ultraviolet light that helps eliminate bacteria and things in the air. The system will currently have your typical air filtration systems that are in every building and are very suitable for the occupants of City Hall. This system is essentially an upgrade that would help protect central dispatch. It would benefit the entire building, but specifically it's in there for central dispatch. Obviously keeping that facility safe in the event of some issue like we're going through right now is paramount. So that's why that was included as an alternate. The way that we have to award this bid, according to the federal rules, is if you're going to have alternates, you have to take a base bid, and then you have to tell the bidders exactly how you're going to select the alternates so that the bidding is fair. So you can't pick alternates 1, 2, 3, and 5 so that you can get the bidder that you want. And so in this case, what we did is we said that we'll award the bid as the base bid plus the alternates in sequential order. So you start at 1, 2, 3, 4, and on down the road. And so if you wanted to stop at alternate 3, you could do that. If you wanted to take no alternates, you could do that. If you wanted to take alternate 9, you'd have to take all alternates 1 through 9. You couldn't skip the ones in the middle to get to what you want.
Following up on that, you recommended, I believe, Rolac as the low bidder.
That's correct.
Would that change, would their position change if we, for some reason, decided to go with alternative 6?
It would not. The base bid difference between Rolac and the next bidder is fairly substantial. And so no matter which alternates are selected, that would not happen.
So
As an option, what the city is allowed to do, and we verify this today, if we award the contract to Rolac based on whatever options the council feels are appropriate at this time, in the future, we can add the air filtration system by change order, going through the appropriate process, if council deems that to be warranted. So assuming that we award the contract tonight, at a later date, we could come back to city council with a proposed change order price that council could award or not award, and we can include that work if council so desires.
at what point would this change order come? Would it come during the construction of the building or after we're finished?
We would like it to come during construction and probably pretty early on, so that if there are equipment items that had to be ordered, that we could do that in short order. We can do this work after the project is completed. Essentially what you're doing is, you remove some ceiling tiles, you'd access the air ducts, and the electrical wires and everything will be there for this equipment. It would have to be installed, and some are easy to get to, I've been told, and some are a little bit more difficult. So the work would likely cost more in the future if we wanted to do that, but the option would also exist to do this at a later date.
So would it be safe to say that we could go ahead with alternatives 1 through 4, and it would make it easier and safer in terms of bidding rules and things like that to fairly quickly afterwards institute that change order? We might end up with paying $27,000. We might end up paying probably a little bit more, but that would kind of keep us out of trouble and make sure all the bidders are satisfied and happy and the federal government's satisfied.
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Padrigula, if we want to award a contract tonight, then we have to follow the procurement rules that we said that we were going to follow. So we would have to select in that numerical order. So if you wanted to award alternate 6 tonight, you'd have to take alternate 5 as well.
Okay.
If you didn't want to do that, then we could award or change order in, alternate 6 at a later time.
Would we have to, would the motion to do that have to be made tonight, or could we defer that until a little bit later in the process?
I think we should defer that to later on in the process.
Okay, okay. Thank you, that's very helpful. Like I said over the phone this morning, I don't have a problem with the others. You've explained that they could be done later. It's no big deal. It's functionable, it's serviceable, and change orders are inevitable. But for me, height and air purification is probably close to a deal breaker. I really, really need to see that for the people working in City Hall, for the people coming to use the facilities, and especially for the safety and security of Central Dispatch, since it was moments away from being incapacitated during the ammonia spill. And I don't think we should be betting on it being immune from those kinds of agents in the future. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further questions for our engineer while he is at the podium? Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome.
I would look back to the motion maker to see if the motion maker would agree to also include in the motion for the mayor to sign the contracts.
Yes.
And does the second agree?
Yeah.
Further discussion on the motion to approve. Alderwoman Olson.
Yeah, thank you. And I just simply had a comment. I'm glad that we are at this point, that the bids have been opened. I think all of us were probably a little concerned that the numbers were going to come in higher than we were hoping, and they did. But I think that we have a reasonable proposal in front of us, and I just, believe that it's something that we need to continue moving forward with. Sometimes delaying some of these decisions only costs us more, and I think that this is something that is so important to the city of Minot that we need to move forward, even with the cost increases.
Further discussion on the motion. Just to put maybe an asterisk on that as well. We have seen that in the past where delayed decisions have cost us more. For any of the public that might be watching at home or might be rewatching this, as a reminder, this is a substantial NDR, National Disaster Resiliency Project, that is substantially funded through those grant dollars. That is not just moving City Hall, but also Central Dispatch into a more secure location as City Hall does get to move into that transition. Any of those exact numbers then can be identified not only in some of the attachments, but in the previous meetings where City Hall numbers were discussed with the funding for the National Disaster Resiliency Grant. Mr. City Manager.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, hopefully to preempt any potential concerns on the part of the public. So this $2 million amendment is proposed by staff to be paid for out of the general fund reserves, which means the taxpayers have already paid for this. So there is no intention of city staff at any point in the future bringing forward a recommendation that would result in any tax increases to fund this difference for this project. I do just want to make that clear on behalf of the council and the public and the staff, that there is no intention of raising taxes to pay this.
Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Pajagula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to 8.5. This is the Recycling Transfer Station Award of Bid Project number 4580. On Thursday, November 4th, 2021, bids were opened for the construction of the transfer facility. There were 2 combined bids received, and the apparent low bidder is Rolette Construction in the amount of $4,177,935.78. The city, along with the consultant for the projects, were able to analyze the bid, and it appears the bid is in line with current bidding climate. Recommendations to City Council are 3 of them. Recommend the council award the bid for the transfer facility to Rolette Construction, Inc. in the amount of $4,177,935.78. 2, recommend that council approve the 2 budget amendments to move funding from the 2022 to the 2021 budget. And 3, recommend the council authorize the mayor to sign the contract documents.
Move approval.
Motion by Alderman Pittner to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Evans. Discussion on the motion. Mr. Sorensen, our Assistant Public Works Director, do you have some details on here?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not really details on this, since you guys did recommend approving. I just thought I would bring you up to date. I've recently had some conversations with a company called Closed Loop Partners. They're a large venture capital firm that provide grants and funding and different things to the circular economy, as they refer to it, and recycling is part of that. Back a couple years ago when we did the feasibility study, we looked at whether this, what we're currently looking at is collecting, compacting, and then hauling to Minneapolis. That hauling cost was always a big number and always, gave a lot of people heartburn, and understandable because we're trying to be environmentally conscious, but then we're just burning fuel up and down the road doing this. But, it has been, analyzed by the EPA, and there is still those environmental savings. But if we could collect and sort locally, that was one of the things that was looked at in the feasibility study. But back then, like, the upfront cost for a sorting facility is about like $10 to $15 million. The capital costs were so large, and then those facilities aren't really scalable for what we were looking at. And in the last couple of years, what I've found out is that's changed. There are some smaller modular plants that can be built, and really they would fit in the existing footprint that is on the table for approval tonight. So I just wanted to let you know that that discussion has happened. What I'll probably do is, if we decide to award the contract to Rolette, we'll probably ask them just to hold off on ordering a couple pieces of equipment that would go in that building. Those would be the only 2 things that would be affected if we decide to go a different direction. And then I want to sit down with these people and look at the dollars and cents, do another cost analysis, and then probably bring that to you guys probably within the next month or so, and just show you and see if it's something that council would be interested in doing or not. So, just an update.
Thank you, Mr. Sorensen. Alderman Pittner, I think. you had your
Thank
hand
you,
up
Mayor.
first.
So Jason, by approving this, is it just come down to swapping out equipment or having different equipment within the facility to have serve as a sorting facility as well?
Mayor Sidma, Alderman Pittner, yes, that's basically what, in the roughly $2 million, there's an allowance in there for a compactor and a conveyor. So we would basically just take those out, and then whatever this other piece of equipment is would replace that.
Alderman Janser.
So if a large scale facility is 10 or 15 million dollars, how much is the mini version? Or, I mean, is it 2 million or is it 6 million or what,
Mayor Sidma,
I guess, we don't know quite what we're getting into then.
Mayor Sidma, Alderman Janser, it all depends on how much automation you put into it. I think there's pricing less than 500,000 up to $1 million, $1.5 million. So they're much smaller and much less expensive than those older systems.
Continue.
Continue, please. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So even if we did that, then what do we do with the material? I mean, we still have to haul it somewhere, right?
Mayor Sidma, Alderman Janser, no. So now we would be dealing with, paper mills, plastic companies, they come up here and get it. So basically, we would get a price from them to buy our material from us, and that would be net minus their transport costs. So we get out of the hauling business.
Alderwoman Evans.
To be clear, right, we're not making that decision tonight.
No, we are not.
You just wanted to apprise us of a conversation that's happening, that the skeleton or the building of the transfer facility has to proceed regardless of, what pieces of machinery are in there. It's not being built next month, and any additional changes would come back to us if we were going to swap out the insides of it.
Mayor
correct?
Sidma, Alderwoman Evans, that's correct. It's basically just the facility as it's planned and as it's presented tonight would remain the same, and it would just be a swap out of equipment. And then, looking at that funding, like Alderman Janser mentioned, if it's more than the two pieces of equipment that we eliminate, do we want to put more into this? And just look at the costs and the benefits and see where we land.
Alderman Pittner,
I'll hold my questions. Mine more so for curiosity.
Alderman Janser.
There was one other thing I was interested in clarification on, and that was, it seems to me that there was a intention to change the floor surface or something and by change order, if I believe I read that correctly. Can you explain that and what the effect would be, Jason?
Mayor Sidma, Alderman Janser, so like I said in the last memo, we basically spent the last month looking at why did this facility come in above budget the way it did, and really there wasn't anything that stood out other than one thing that was added into the project when we got their schedule of values. It's called a metal aggregate topping slab, so it's a high strength concrete that has pieces of metal in it that's abrasion resistant, very durable to like having loaders and things scraping and pushing on it. That single line item was in the neighborhood of about $340,000, I believe. That I don't know exactly what the savings would be. We'll look at that. It's probably in the neighborhood of a couple $1,000s. I think we can make adjustments in our operation. We can use rubber cutting edges and things just so we're not beating on that floor with equipment. And I think we can get by without it.
I think you said a couple $1,000s, but I think you meant a couple $100,000, which is what I remembered from the memo.
Yes, you're right.
Okay, thank you. So, so with that, if that, let's say it's $200,000 to use a round number, it does reduce this bid then to much closer to the engineer's estimate of where this thing would have come in. Is that correct?
Mayor Sitma, Alderman Janser, that's correct. And if you look at this project in conjunction with the project that we awarded last month, the interior roads and the entrance, we were planning on about $5.5 million for the two. So that one came in well under, and this one has come in under. So in the end, we're basically about where we were budgeting these projects to come in.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions for Mr. Sorensen? Alderwoman Olson.
Thank you. This is somewhat related to this. With approval of this item tonight, we are saying yes to recycling if it is approved, if we, vote to approve it. So after years of discussion, it all hinges on this vote. However, and there's a lot of support. We get emails on a weekly basis on people who are in support of this. We know that there are some who are not. And long ago, we'd had a discussion on whether we would have this opt-in available for our citizens, for those that did not choose to recycle. So I just want to clarify for anyone that might ask now, will they still have that option of either opting in, opting out, however it is? Will they have the choice when this is fully functional?
Mayor Sitma, Alderwoman Olson, yes. We haven't really worked out all the details, but the opt-out has always been on the table. I think that's probably the fairest way to go about it, so that the people that don't want it, don't necessarily have to participate. We did, we looked at opt-in versus opt-out. We've seen over the years when we ask questions of the community, it's very difficult to get that input back. So I think if the opt-in, I think it would be, it's just hard to get to everybody and find all those different ways to inform all the people that they need to make a decision or contact us. So the opt-out, I think, will end up with a higher participation rate in the end. But those that feel strongly about not wanting to participate will have that opportunity to tell us they don't want to participate.
All right, thank you for that clarification.
Alderman Janser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this isn't so much a question for Jason, although maybe it kind of can be. I think, as Alderman Olson points out, this discussion has gone on in the community for a long time. And it really started in earnest, I think, with the ad hoc committee that I believe was chaired by Alderman Schuler at that time. And the thought process was set in motion to go to automated pickup, and then ultimately beyond that to a recycling component that would be added. And I think it's important to note that this is a service, as we're a city involved in providing city services. This is a service that many people in the community feel is needed, that they desire. There is also a component in the community who don't care, don't think it's necessary, don't want to be involved. And I guess I respect both of those positions. But I think in order for us to make an impact with recycling, it has to be on a scale that works. And what we've seen from the studies and what we've seen from the information that Jason has given us is that to scale it so that we're able to do this in a sufficient enough way to make an impact, that has to be a little bit automated and a little bit easy for the citizens. And so you will remember that we did a statistically valid survey that indicated that we would have sufficient participation. And that is what has essentially brought us to this vote tonight. And I agree with Alderman Olson that it's kind of, it's not the chicken and the egg. We're in the pork stage here, where we're fully committing. So I wanted to say those things because I think the other component here is that this residential recycling program should really be looked at as step one or a initial step along the path to affecting more of the things that are going into the landfill. And that down the road, I would hope that we are looking at what happens with the commercial refuse or recyclables, as well as the other places in the city that aren't part of our 10,000 households that will be participating in this process. So I look to the future for that, and I hope that we are able to expand on this residential program as we go forward. Thank you.
Further discussion on the motion to approve. We also do have a few people here that might be wanting to speak on this. The motion is to approve. If there is anyone, I would allot some time here at the podium. If you do want to come forward and say a few words, we can certainly give you a couple of minutes. Okay, seeing none. Just finally, I do want to hit a few last points on this. When this did move out in 2015, 2016, there were other components of this moving to automation. If you remember, we had substantial discussions regarding the workers' comp claims from a large number of employees who were trash collectors who filed those claims because of injuries, whether it was slips, falls, or bad backs, or whatever it was. That absolutely was substantial in cost savings, and that alone. And we did prove that we didn't have a bunch of people out of work at that time being laid off who were trash collectors. One of the other points was a substantial amount of garbage that was blowing around because it was just thrown out on the curb for these windy days. And occasionally, yes, our big trash cans still do blow down, but that is a vast improvement to our community, I believe, very strongly for someone who picks garbage along the river several times a year yet. It has gotten much, much better, although we can do much, much better moving forward, too. And to the rest of all of what Alderman Janser and I think others have stated here, it's been a long process with lots of input, and this is the final phase, and I'm going to support it. Final call for discussion. Motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Pittner,
Yes.
Pajagula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to our next item, 8.6, the amendment, approve the amendment to the subrecipient agreement with Dakota College at Bottineau for the Center for Technical Education. Planning for a Career in Technical Education CTE Center in Minot dates back to 2015 when the city of Minot applied for funding from the National Disaster Resiliency Competition. The purpose of this program is to provide grants to communities so that they can rebuild and recover from major disasters. In this case, it was the flood of 2011. The city was successful in receiving a $74.3 million grant from the Department of Housing and Urban Development for a number of projects related to the goal of becoming a more resilient community. The recommendations to the City Council was to approve an amendment to the subrecipient agreement with Dakota College at Bottineau to rehabilitate, equip, and operate the Center for Technical Education, also known as CTE.
Move approval, Mr. Mayor.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson to approve, second by Alderman Janser. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion on the motion to approve? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Pajagula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans, Janser.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Our final item in our action item section is 8.7, the approve the eminent domain for 2719 12th Avenue Southwest and 2723 12th Avenue Southwest. The properties are located in what is identified as buyout area number 2 in support of the HUD-approved CDBG NDR action plan. The city has carried out the due diligence with these owners of the properties as set forth in HUD's involuntary acquisition guidelines and the requirements of the Federal Uniform Relocation Act. The recommendations to the City Council is to approve the resolution authorizing commencing eminent domain proceedings for 2719 12th Avenue Southwest 2723 12th Avenue Southwest, and vacant lot, legal descriptions, Lot 5, 6, and 7, Brecky subdivision of the portion of the northwest quarter, northwest section of Section 27, Township 155 North, Range 83 west of the 5th PM, Minot, North Dakota, in Ward County. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Pittner. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion on the motion to approve? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Pajagula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to our next item. That's 9 personal appearances. This is an opportunity for anyone to come forward and speak on any item that is or is not on our agenda this evening. If you would just state your name and your city of address.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Shannon Strait, 115 8th Avenue Southeast. I just wanted to express a thank you for the earlier discussion regarding the Ann Street Bridge. I thought that was fruitful. And I did want to just comment that what I heard Mr. Bent say is the current M6 design is at 30%. M5 was at 90% when the railroad requested some additional changes. The M6 design, Mr. Bent stated he wanted to have approved in 2023. I think it's important to recognize that the Ann Street Bridge is the responsibility of the city of Minot. Much like the Corps of Engineers punished us for the cofferdams being in place because of what happened after the flood. We're in the situation we're in right now because the bridge has been there before any of us. So to come to a solution in the next couple of weeks is probably going to take a little bit more time. The SRJB's next meeting is going to happen after the city council meeting in early January. And I think it would be prudent to give us an opportunity to put together a little more of a thoughtful way that we might be able to proceed. So I would just ask that you keep that in mind when you think of scheduling. It's a pretty big lift and Christmas is upon us. So I think putting together a presentation that might be able to make the mark for a project that's been here since long before any of us is probably expecting a lot, and we'd probably like a little more time. I can understand that we're going to make that request, be it now or in 2 weeks. I can imagine we'll do our very best, but I think we're going to definitely want to get in front of the SRJB again and talk about it, and it's highly unlikely we're going to have anything substantial put together before you would want to vote on this, and there's no reason to make the determination. I appreciate Alderman Olson asking that question. It doesn't have to be determined immediately. And a community solution of this magnitude, I think, is going to take a little creative time. Mr. Mayor, you and I talked earlier today about NAS and funding. If the design of this is not going to be put forward in its entirety until 2023, NAS is probably going to be built close to that point. And when we start talking about where a dollar is going to come from, you know, where the NAS dollar is going to go once the project is completed. So keep in mind some of these issues as we think about how we can fund these projects. I appreciate the city manager's the presentation regarding pedestrian. Clearly, folks want pedestrian passageways in town. We want sidewalks. The city of Minot is also responsible for the Eastwood Park Bridge. It's historic in nature. We're not doing really anything. And so what's the end result ultimately that happens? It gets condemned and it has to get torn down. So if we're going to talk about some of these projects, I think we also have to just look at the bigger long-term picture of how we can solve some of them, because they're elements that are part of the city's history, and it'd be really terrible to lose them. So I appreciate your time and consideration as we plot a pathway forward. So Merry Christmas to you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strait. Again, this is an opportunity for personal appearances. Anyone to come forward and speak on any item that that is or is not on our agenda. Seeing none, we will move on to our liaison reports. Alderman Patagula, we'll start over on your side.
Thank you very much. I've been waiting for this chance for quite a few weeks. I have 3 major things to report on. The first is, or 4 maybe, the first is the ongoing struggles of the Ward County Planning Commission. In addition to dealing with variances and things like that, routine business, we have been plodding along trying to get some clarification of right-of-way requirements. And there is one bit of interesting news there. The county commissioners have directed staff to not enforce an ordinance that we have, a zoning ordinance at the county level in terms of right-of-ways, and that's put staff in a very difficult predicament because you have to enforce an ordinance. You can't just ignore it. So one of the things that came out of that meeting was that the county commissioners, at least 2 of them, will be proposing something to come before the county commission, and it appears they will be trying to repeal that ordinance or modify it in terms of what right-of-way is required on various roads in the county. So they're going to do it on the up and up, and it's been very awkward to watch of them, I think, ignoring in some ways the advice of their attorney. One of the things I've learned in 20 years is that you really take a big chance when you ignore the advice of your attorney on something like this. So hopefully things will be coming together, and I'll leave it to Carrie to talk further about that. But there is some improvement there coming, and it sounds like some significant action emanating from the commissioners, originating from the commissioners. So in terms of that group, making some progress. The second group I sit on is the Manna Commission on Aging, and there things are going pretty well. They adopted a budget, hiring new staff to replace people who have left. Congregate meals are still down. People are, again, I think, becoming more concerned about COVID, but they are delivering more meals to people, which is important. So people aren't clustering together as much, but they are using those services more significantly, which is good. So things there seem generally under control. And in connection with that, I wanted to single out a staff member of ours, Derek Hackett. During a previous meeting of the group, they were looking at their budget and pay increases for staff, and they asked how the city was handling this. And I was kind of at a loss, so I called finance and I called HR, and everybody was out to lunch. It was lunchtime, so I don't blame them. And the person I managed to reach was Derek, and he looked it up online while I was waiting, and I was able to give that information to the group, and it greatly facilitated their making a decision on their budget. So I really wanted to express my appreciation. Normally when I ask staff to do something, I don't expect to do them to do it in real time, and Derek did, and I appreciated it, and it really helped the board of the Commission on Aging. The next group I have to report on is the Emergency Resource Council. They've had 2 meetings since they last reported, and one of those representative of the State Fire Marshal presented. Things are improving in terms of drought conditions, and they are actively planning to protect us, keep protecting us from all sorts of misfortunes that may arise. One of the things we'll be having this summer is a full-scale disaster exercise at the airport that has to be done every 3 years for FAA certification, I believe. So the planning is in the works for that, and it's really gratifying to see all the people who get together on a monthly basis representing their organizations who are doing their utmost to try to keep us safe. And let's see here. I think that basically was it. Yeah, those are the formal groups there. So that's my report.
Thank you, Alderman Patagula. Alderwoman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may, I'm going to go back to agenda item 10, just briefly, under miscellaneous and discussion items, because this kind of popped into my head when we earlier had the results of the satisfaction survey. And I thought at this time of year, it's very important for us as a council to recognize our employees and for all of the hard work that they have done in 2021. And part of that survey may have reflected poorly on some employees. And I'm hoping that that was not the message that was being sent. I think that survey is purposeful for us to look as we're budgeting and allotting for a number of employees in different departments and paying for the equipment that they need. And so I am thankful and grateful for all that our city employees do. And I know that when the crews need to get out, when we have a significant snow situation, they do their best and they work around the clock. And so I'm hoping that survey does not reflect on them personally. It is more of just information for us as we go into the budgeting process for upcoming years. So thank you and Merry Christmas to our employees. As far as liaison goes, just 4 brief committee meetings to report on. The first was a liaison committee back in November. It was a pretty brief meeting. We did address the citywide planning item that we had actually dealt with here at council level. We had a little discussion. We're going to get some more information and will be reporting back to us in January. We did have some updates on the school election that has now taken place, and so the meeting was very brief. We do have our next meeting scheduled for January 13th. City manager had mentioned this in the last meeting that I had helped with some of the Pride rollout meetings with city employees, so I did that. I was able to attend the Service Basin Planning Council holiday event, and then just last week we had the CTE kickoff meeting, which I think is rather ironic since we've been working on it for a number of years, but we're into the next process or the next step, and so I was part of that meeting as well, and just know that we're moving forward on that project. So thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman Olson. And as I did skip number 10, we can circle back to that right after liaison reports here, as I missed that one entirely. Alderwoman Evans.
I don't have anything to add about the Planning Commission. The library is, so I just want to commend the library staff for getting through another difficult year with COVID and other related issues, and still getting our numbers up and the community engaged as best they can, and we all appreciate it. This also was a record year for library staff in actually pursuing grant funding and getting it. So I'd like to commend the different levels of staff. It's just not Janet. I mean, certainly she's empowered her entire staff to apply for different levels of funding and grants for different things, and they have and got some. So that is amazing, and I love that staff over there are doing that. Just a quick, I am the City Council liaison to the NDR Family Shelter. As folks know, that was a project that LSS was the subrecipient for, and then they went bankrupt, and so we were fortunate to find the new subrecipient of a local organization, Project B, which used to be Minot YWCA. And we are working hard. They are working hard, and the team to get moving forward on plans for both the shelter and the LMI housing. So stay tuned for forward progress on that.
Thank you, Alderwoman Evans. And that actually was a point of, I was going to reach out recently. Are we on tap to meet that deadline for our NDR September 30th, 2022 deadline?
If everything goes, I mean, Mr. Stewart may have.
Mr. City Manager.
Yes, staff has been working diligently with Project B, trying to make sure that they continue to be successful. We've identified basically a project timeline for different thresholds that have to be met at certain points in order to keep the project on pace. That included overcoming some obstacles here at the very beginning, which I believe we have overcome those. And so right now it is on schedule and currently progressing positively.
Okay. And to correct myself, to make sure, deadline of September 2023.
I know you said my little stopped. What?
It's been a long day. For my quick report here, mine did start this morning with Ward County Weed Board, where we spent several hours. Believe it or not, a noxious weed that we've been trying very hard in North Dakota to keep out is called Palmer amaranth, and it is here in Ward County now. And why is that important? Because it affects actually a significant amount of our crop production, can have very negative impacts that they've been struggling with in many other states that very well could have impactful negative impacts to a lot of our producers if it gets into especially the soybeans and sunflowers and other crops, and how that also ties into what exactly we're doing here with our MAC EDC and our port, and that's shipping high-value ag commodities out of our port to the world. So we spent a significant amount of time actually talking with quite a few different experts on that this morning, and even taking a look at some potential ideas of drone activity in trying to deal with that and some other noxious weeds that are quite problematic. And of course, the drought this year did not help. And if you all remember back to our ad hoc committees, it was the nuisance complaint committee that introduced a city member onto the Ward County Weed Board. So I have been fulfilling that duty for a good number of years now, but it is interesting in how it all ties all back together. Also, with MADC, I think you heard most of the activity that I've been involved with, and also city staff with some of the contract detail meetings as we're working towards that, as well as the negotiation for the port contract and how that is going to look. And just one last point, or two last points here. Quick, the state of the city is going to be coming up, and we're shooting for February. So we will be working towards that. And then I did go down to Bismarck and testified before the Water Topics Committee, and that was in conjunction with the SRJB, and we decided to take a little different tactic to where the SRJB chairman testified on the progress and activity that's up ahead for 2022 and 2023 for the city's portion, and I testified on all of the rural outreaches activities for the next biennium ahead, and that is all in an effort to ensure that all of the folks down the Water Commission understand that this is still a basin-wide project and still working collectively and collaboratively together. Alderman Ross.
Kind of like trying to back up Frank Sinatra here. December 8th, the Zoning Ordinance and Steering Committee, we met to review some changes proposed by staff, and we have a follow-up meeting in January, and that's my report, Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Janser.
Mr. Mayor, the liaison committee and whatnot that I've been involved in was covered, so nothing further.
Alderman Pittner.
Thank you, Mayor. Renaissance Board, I am the liaison for. Activity there, approving, we just approved a, one of our applications for Broadway project that just completed. Also had Stefan Jers at our last meeting to discuss First Avenue downtown and just some of the hardships there with getting some improvements done there. That's what I have for that committee. Visit Minot. Visit Minot, again, good things. Visit Minot's been selected for the second time as one of the few organizations in the country to receive the beta test for the latest updates in software for their data collection services. According to the company, Visit Minot is identified because of how they strategically utilize the information that they gather and strategically implement them into the community. Also, everything's a little delayed, but Canadian visitor information is available. Everything gets delayed about a month or two. So Visit Minot will be traveling around the city to all the stakeholders to, again, divulge that information to help them make more strategic and informed decisions when marketing and advertising their businesses. So that's what I got.
All right, thank you, Alderman Pittner, and I will just circle back around to the miscellaneous and discussion items, as I did skip that on our agenda if there are any items that need to be discussed for the good of the order this evening. All right, that takes us to our final item, and that is adjournment.
So moved.
Motion by Alderman Pittner to adjourn, second by Alderman Ross. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign. We're adjourned.